Hey guys, Matthew, and today I want to bring you guys a video on everything to do with the chaos recipe. I've been advocating for the chaos recipe for a very long time now, as I'm a firm believer that it is nearly almost mandatory, especially as a solo player on your league start, to be doing the chaos recipe, as I do think it fades away pretty quickly in a league. Whenever exalts reach around 70 to 80 chaos, I think it's no longer worth doing, but still I do want to share why I think it's so good with you guys, and then I want to actually go ahead and give you guys a little bit of a guide on my new chaos recipe tool, or at least my new favorite one, as this one isn't my own anymore. So let's get right into it. So first off, what is the chaos recipe? Well, for anybody who's newer to the game or who has never heard of it, essentially whenever you sell an entire set of gear, you will get one chaos. That being said, this entire set of gear needs to be between level 60 and 74, or at least one of the items needs to be between these levels. The other items can all be level 75 and above, so long as one of them is between 60 and 74, it will give you one chaos. So that means 2 weapons, 2 rings, amulet, a belt, a chest piece, gloves, boots, and a helmet. Or instead of 2 weapons, it could be a 2-handed weapon, such as a bow or a 2-handed axe or something like that. Whenever you sell that to a vendor, it will give you 1 chaos. That being said, if it is unidentified, it will give you 2 chaos, which is what I typically recommend. Now, the reason why I would recommend going with unidentified is because items between levels 60 and 74 have a very low chance of being worth anything anyways, just due to the fact that lower level means a lower potential for mods to be of high tier. Mods basically have different tiers, and these tiers are locked behind item levels, and most of these good mods are at least item level 78 and above for the most part. Therefore, lower level items, there's no reason to identify them, so might as well get those double chaos at a time. So why do I think this is so strong when we're only talking about 2 chaos? Well, first off, chaos recipe is not going to make you rich. You're not going to farm mirrors off of the chaos recipe, and you're not going to be able to buy a headhunter in the first day of a league off of the chaos recipe. The difference though between doing the chaos recipe and not doing the chaos recipe is basically progression. Chaos recipe is one of your best and honestly strongest tool when it comes to progression early in a league, because while it will not make you rich, what the chaos recipe will allow you to do is be able to afford either upgrading your character to where you can actually progress faster, because obviously you have more damage, more survivability, whatever, right? Buying those mandatory uniques for whatever build you're playing, stuff like that. Not only that, it's going to allow you to buy those little cheap mapping currencies so that you can actually invest into your maps earlier than everybody else who is not doing the chaos recipe, because they are waiting to get, lucky when it comes to drops to be able to afford anything, right? So for example, alchemies, chisels, val orbs, sextants are a prime example of things that somebody doing the chaos recipe will be able to afford as early as the league start, as early as honestly T1 maps, and already start to really progress much faster and have a much easier time with things like map sustain, because they're going to be investing proper amount into their maps because they can actually afford to. So the way that I see the chaos recipe, it's literally the stepping stone that allows you to progress much faster into the end game and into the kind of content that will actually lead you to be able to farm, mirrors or headhunter or whatever you want to be able to afford, because you'll be doing higher tier content, and therefore typically higher tier content is where the money's at, especially in recent times where GGG has severely nerfed things like magic finding in lower tier maps and whatnot. It's all about higher tier content and getting through it as fast as possible. So now that I've gotten why I think the chaos recipe is so very strong out of the way, let's get into how to maximize chaos recipe. So there's been a lot of different eras to the chaos recipe, if you will. For a while, people used to do different tabs for each of specific items, so they would have a tab for, say, belts, and a tab for weapons, and a tab for boots, and so on and so forth, and that was fairly decent, but not so efficient. Then came the time where people would use separators in their quad tabs, or even their normal tabs, to try to basically get the items to auto sort themselves in the tabs, and that was pretty successful. The only issue with that is that you couldn't differentiate, say, gloves from boots, because those are both 2x2 slots, right? So they would just kind of go in randomly, and you would have to manually pick the right things, and that was costing you a little bit of time. Nowadays, though, we have things such as chaos recipe tools. The first known chaos recipe tool that went public was the one that I made public, coded by a friend of mine, which was Last League. Especially the biggest part of that tool was the fact that we had an auto-updating filter, which would not only allow you to easily do the chaos recipe, but it would also allow you to hide items that you didn't care for and highlight items that you cared for during your mapping. But my tool, unfortunately, I didn't have any issues with it, but some other people did. And unfortunately, the coder for the tool is really busy in real life, so he will not be updating the tool for 3.13. So we had to go out there and get a new one. Fortunately for us, ever since we released the code, the source code, and of course the idea behind the tool and behind the auto-updating filter, other people have gone out and made some tools that were basically either similar to ours or even in some cases better. Today, I want to showcase one that is what I would consider to be better. It's more user-friendly, and it does seem to have a little bit more features, and overall, it's just easier to use. So the one that I'll be showcasing is the Chaos Recipe Enhancer by Kosachi. Now, I'm going to have a link to the GitHub page in the description of the video, as I always do, so you can easily get this. Now, let me run it down, show you guys how this works. So first off, you're going to download the Chaos Recipe Enhancer setup.msi, which is a Microsoft installer. This is actually a program, not just a .exe executable file. That tends to make programs both, well, better when it comes to false positives for antiviruses, but also it is better for stability as well. All right, so let's get right into the game and hop onto the tool. So I'm just going to type in Enhancer, and you'll see that this is what it looks like, Chaos Recipe Enhancer. Now, before I go into this, let me start off by saying that this is completely fine when it comes to GGG. So these tools, no matter if you use the one that I had before or this new one here, they do not interact with the game client or servers or anything like that at all. They are completely outside of the game, and they are only overlays. What that means is that actually this doesn't break any rules in regards to terms of service, because it doesn't automate anything. While things like the automatic filter updating, for example, is really cool, and some people might think it actually breaks terms of service as it automates, the changing of a filter. Well, in reality, all it does is it changes the file, the filter file in your documents, right? And this does not interact with the client at all, and you have to manually go in your UI and actually refresh the filter. So technically, this doesn't break any rules. So no, this is not bannable. You will not get any issues for using these. I have been using these for multiple leagues now, on stream, off stream, in videos. I've spoken about it. There is nothing against terms of service here. Let me get that straight out of the way. Now that that's out of the way, let's hop into the tool settings, and let me give you guys a quick rundown of how everything works and what everything is. Account name is clearly going to be your account name, as this is an API related tool that actually fetches data from the API. Because of that, you're going to need your PoE session ID. If you don't know what this is, under the link for the tool itself, I'll have a quick guide which explains how to find your PoE session ID on different browsers. It's very simple. You don't have to worry about that. League, in this case, I'll be using standard for the example, but clearly we are going into the ritual league, so you would just simply type ritual, and that would be fixed right there. All right. Full set threshold is how many full sets of chaos recipes do you want to have at a time maximum. I recommend having this around 12. You can fit about 16 if you were to perfectly line up your items in a quad tab. But unfortunately, as you're mapping, you're going to get things like 6 sockets. You're going to get things like maps and all that. Some things will work with your tab affinities if you own, different tabs. But either way, I recommend not using 16 as it can get a little convoluted down there with tons and tons of items that are rare, but then it leaves no place for other items. So leave it around like 8 to 12 and that'll be pretty good. Fortunately, this tool works for both quad tabs and regular tabs. In a regular tab, you can fit 4 full sets, so maybe keep it to like 3 or 4 and then use multiple different non-quad tabs to actually do the chaos recipe most efficiently. You don't want to be doing the chaos recipe every time you have one set available. You want to be farming multiple sets and turning them all on at the same time to try to be as efficient as possible. The refresh rate is essentially this tool is refreshing on a periodic basis. So every 60 seconds, for example, here the tool is going to fetch data from the API, and it's going to ask the API, you know, what's in this stash right now. You can obviously manually refresh whenever you want, but there is an automatic refresh on the base version is actually always automatic. So I recommend using a number around 60. You don't necessarily need to go higher than that, but you don't want to go too low either. The thing is that there's a maximum number of requests to the API that you can make from your IP address and from your session ID. Otherwise, if you go over that limit, the API is simply going to lock you, and then you need to stop all requests to the API for a couple minutes before the API lets you back in. If you keep doing requests while you're locked out, it is just going to keep you locked out infinitely. You really need to stop doing all requests. So that's why I recommend not having it too low, because let's say you have it at the minimum, which is 15 seconds, then the tool is requesting information to the API over 15 seconds. But if you're also trying to buy things for your build, you know, buy mapping supplies or whatever on the website, and you do multiple searches of these items too quickly, you can actually reach the limit very, very quickly. So you do want to be careful here. Feel greedy mode is essentially what I was mentioning earlier. In a full set of gear, you only need one item to be between level 60 and 74 to do the chaos recipe instead of the regal recipe, which is what typically is going to happen for items that are 75 and above. So feel greedy mode is going to try to use the least amount of lower level items so that you can use some leftover lower level items when you're doing higher tier maps and still be able to do the chaos recipe. It's a cool feature. The only thing is, as I mentioned, typically as you're going through higher tier maps, you will want to start identifying items or just not picking up rares at all. You can just sell maps instead, and instead of having to pick up, let's say, 10 different items to make 2 chaos from a chaos recipe when you're mapping in higher tiers, say red maps, for example, a single T11 map will sell from anywhere from 4 to 6 chaos, right? And even more than that at the start of a league. So realistically, you're better off just mapping quicker than worrying about picking up rares for the chaos recipe. But if for some reason you would like to keep doing chaos recipe a little bit later than just like T7 maps, which is where they typically stop, you can actually use this feel greedy mode. In my case, I'll just keep it on, but it doesn't really matter. Exalt Shard recipe is essentially the same thing as the chaos recipe, but for influenced items. So Shaper, Elder, and so on, and it will give you Exalt Shards instead of Chaos. But unfortunately, right now, this is not fully functional, but at the same time, I actually wouldn't recommend using this either way, because typically influence items you do want to identify as the bases tend to be worth at least something, especially when it comes to the jewelry, as you can you know, do some pretty cool stuff with them. For example, all amulet bases can be changed into Onyx Amulet, and Onyx Amulet bases of almost any influence type is worth a decent amount in the early stage of the league, more so than you would get from your Exalt Shard recipe. So, stash tab mode. This is essentially how you tell the tool which stash tabs are dedicated for your chaos recipe. You've got 2 different methods. The ID method is essentially the number ID of your stash. So I'm going to go ahead and remove my remove only tabs so I can give you guys a rundown on how that works. So essentially, the way that your ID works on your chaos recipe here, ID is essentially the number of the tab, and it starts with 0. So this is tab 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on, right? Next, let's say you had chaos recipe and you wanted to use it for the first tab and the third tab. This is what I have set up here. It would be 0 and 2. So you could put, for example, you know, your your money tab, your currency tab is your second tab, and easily, use it like that. The next thing that you can do is use a prefix. So the prefix is the first part of the name of the tab. So for example, here it would be chaos. Now you do have to be careful when you use a prefix, because let's say I wanted to use the prefix just a C, like a capital C, and I had it set up for chaos. Then it would actually consider, for example, my div card tab as that's also a C. So you want to use something as a prefix that is not going to be used in any of your other tabs. But for example, this tab here, which is called price 8 chaos, will not be accounted for because the prefix is actually the little price here, the tilde and the price. The chaos, while it's also in the name of the tab, is not in the prefix, it's the suffix of the tab. So you don't have to worry about that. All right. Next, we have the overlay. That's up to you, personal preference on the opacity. Close to trays makes it so that whenever you close the program here by pressing the X, it doesn't actually close the program. It's just going to minimize it and put it on your tray. What happens if you want to reopen it from there is that you'll see that it's not on my taskbar, but it is still in my tray, and I can double click it in my tray and it's going to open it again. Now, I recommend always having this on, because if you have this off and you close the program, it's actually going to close it, and you'd have to reopen it, which is annoying. Overlay mode, I just use the standard. I haven't really messed around with it too much. Show item amounts. This is to show the actual number of items that you have in a given tab. I recommend having this on. Toggle overlay. So you've got 3 different hotkeys for this tool. The first hotkey is going to open up the overlay. So this is the number, by the way, the show item amounts. I recommend having this on. It shows you not only whether you need to pick up the item or not, but also the amount that you have, which is good to know whenever you're going through your maps, right? To know what's your bottleneck outside of jewelry. Next, we have toggle fetching. So instead of pressing fetch start, you can just press F2 and it's going to go ahead and fetch. So for example, you can see that in this tab right now, I have 9 pairs of gloves, 9 pairs of boots, 1 helmet, 9 armors, and so on and so forth. Next, we have toggle stash tab. Now, this is kind of where the magic happened, and we can press F3, and you will see that this nice little overlay shows up. So this is one of the advantages of using this tool over, for example, my own tool that I had last league. This one, you don't need to input your screen resolution, and it doesn't care about coordinates. You can literally just place this overlay wherever you want. So we're going to line this up with our tab here, and then we can drag and drop by holding the top over here, and then we are going to basically change the size here by using the little white triangle at the bottom, and we're going to line it all up, and once it's all good, we're going to press save. Now you'll see that we have some red stuff in here, and this is basically the items for our chaos recipe. You'll see that some of them have some little white X's on them, and that is basically the order in which you should be picking up the items. If you actually follow the little white X's, you are going to pick up the items in a way that is going to maximize space usage in your inventory, which is nice because by doing so you can actually fit in 2 full chaos recipes and even have a little bit of leftover at the bottom. So that's really, really nice. If you, for example, picked up boots and then a chest piece, it would potentially mess up and make it so you're not able of actually filling your inventory with 2 full chaos recipes. So as you can see now, I picked up my chaos recipe and I only had 1 available since I only had 1 helmet. If I had another chaos recipe available in this tab, it would just highlight the next one right away because it just knows that there's another recipe, and it would just highlight the next one, the next one, the next one. Now the thing though is that whenever you close this overlay here and you open it again, you will see that the highlight for the chaos recipe has reset. So even if I've actually picked up these items, right, these spots are all empty, the overlay is still on those items, because while whenever I close the overlay and open it again, there is nothing that tells the tool, hey, these items were actually picked up, because like I said, this is an overlay. It doesn't interact with the memory of the game. Because of that, you're going to have to wait this 60 seconds for the API to refresh for it to actually know whether you picked up that chaos recipe or not. Not only do you have to wait for the 60 seconds to happen, or you can obviously manually go ahead and refresh yourself. Like I'll go ahead and show here. I'll go ahead and stop the refresh, and I'm going to go ahead and refresh myself, you'll see that it still thinks that I have a helmet. So the reason why it thinks that I have a helmet is because not only does the tool need a refresh, but the API also needs a refresh. The API, if I'm just sitting in my hideout, will not refresh more than once every 3 or 4 minutes. The way that I need to tell the API that I want it to refresh is by switching zone. Now, this was put in place by GGG to just prevent the API from constantly refreshing, so it takes a lot of stress out of the API. Now that I've actually changed zone, the API has been told, hey dude, go ahead and refresh and tell me what's in my stash now. Now, if I go ahead and refresh the tool itself, you'll see that we have 0 helmets. Therefore, if I open up the overlay, there is nothing highlighted because there's no available chaos recipes due to the fact that we're missing a helmet. So very, very nice there. My bad. So next we have stash tab overlay, where you can actually change the opacity of the overlay itself. You can change the background. So this is in regards to this little overlay here. So you'll see that you can actually change the opacity. So how bright you want this little white to be. I keep it in the middle. Otherwise, you know, it can kind of hurt your eyes. The background of the overlay, even if ever you've got a personal preference there. The highlight color as well for the different chaos recipe. So you can also change that. All right, next you have the highlight mode. So this, you can change it to be item by item, to where instead of highlighting the whole set, is going to be 1 item at a time. So it's still going to follow the rule set to allow you to do 2 chaos recipes at a time. So chest pieces into weapons, into the 2x2 slots, into the smaller items, right? But I'd recommend just having it by set because you can see the full set. It's nice that way. All right, then we have the tab header stuff. I don't even know what this does, to be completely honest, so it's whatever. All right, next is where the second part of the magic happens, and that is going to be the automatically updating filter. So you are going to be, you're going to have to enable the loot filter manipulation, because this tool, what it does is that it's going to manipulate or edit your filter on the go, depending on what you're asking, how many full sets you're asking, and how many items you have. So for example, here I'm asking for 12 full sets, but just for the sake of this example, I'm going to change that to 6 full set. And now you'll see that if I go ahead and refresh, some of these icons are going to be grayed out. What this means, if they're grayed out, is that they're going to be now hidden on my filter, because I'm asking for 6 full sets and I actually have 8 chest pieces in my tab. So the tool is like, well, he's asking for 6, we've got 8, we don't need chest pieces anymore, we are going to hide them on the filter. So we are going to enable loot filter manipulation, and we are going to choose the location of our filter. The default would be under documents, my game path of exile, but if you have it saved somewhere else, then that's on you. So I'm going to use filter test, and we're just going to open it, and it's that simple. Now, we also get to choose the color of these different items, which is really nice. And as you choose the color, you'll see that it actually changes the color on the overlay to actually match it, which is also really cool. So this is useful if you're, for example, colorblind with different colors. You can actually change the exact colors that you will have an easy time actually being able to differentiate as you're mapping. Not that it's too big of an issue, as the things that you don't care for will be hidden from you. So you get to choose a color for each of those. Then you have a notification for sound. This notification here is going to play whenever you need to refresh your loot filter. So whenever you do some chaos recipes and the tool knows that you're doing them, right? As whenever you refresh, there's going to be either more or less of, for example, you have 8 armors here and you're asking for 6, therefore the tool has hidden them. But let's say you did 3 chaos recipes and this went down to 5. Now all of a sudden the tool wants to pick up chest pieces again to go back up to 6. So it's going to give you a notification to remind you that you need to reload, my bad, your loot filter. So I'll go over that in a second. So I'm going to keep it off because I don't tend to forget, because I'm used to using tools like this, but you can keep this on. It's a nice reminder. So let me go ahead and save these settings, and then let me show you guys what this is all about. So let's go ahead and close that up. And I'm going to go ahead and pick up a few chest pieces for this example here, as we have 8 of them and we are asking for 6 of them. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into whatever other zone, and I'm going to refresh my loot filter now. Now that I've refreshed my loot filter, the new things that, the changes have been made. So what that means is, for example, chess pieces, which I'm asking for 6, I have 8 of them, therefore they should be hidden, and they are, right? They're gone from the filter. You can obviously still see them if you hold Alt, but they are gone, and as you can see, the color is matching the overlay, which is also really nice again. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell the tool, hey, you know what? I actually want to see 12 sets at a time. Now, whenever you make any changes to the actual filter, you're going to need to stop the fetch and start it again. So then it sees what's in your inventory or what's in your stash tabs, and then it's going to refresh the filter. See, now I have 5 body armors and I'm asking for 12, therefore they are back on the overlay. Therefore, if I go ahead and refresh my filter here and I drop this body armor, they're actually right back on the filter. So the idea here is that we want to be as efficient as possible when it comes to looting those different rare items as we are going through different maps. So we don't end up with, say, 70 body armors, because we are never going to be able to get jewelry at the same rate. We're never going to get 70 amulets by the time we have 70 body armors, so there's no reason to fill our stash tabs with 70 body armors, when instead we can go and get a maximum of, say, 12 to do 12 full chaos recipes, and then we can just hide them completely because we don't care about picking them up anymore until we have enough jewelry to complete those 12 chaos recipes, at which point it's going to start showing body armors again, and rinse and repeat, and you have a really nice and efficient chaos recipe making methods. So that's pretty much it for this tool. I have to say, big ups to the coder. It's really well done. So Kosachi, well done, sir. My community is obviously going to be using this. I think anybody watching this video who is going to be playing on PC should be using this. I don't know if these kind of tools are available on console, since I've never played on console. But if you're on PC, and especially if you're a solo player, you should be doing the chaos recipe at the start of a league. It is going to be such a huge difference to your progression. Trust me on that. There's a reason I do it, even if I'm somebody who gets to maps very quickly, and who typically gets to red maps also very quickly. It is worth it. Running out of currency and not being able to afford mapping currencies and all that, or not being able to afford mandatory uniques for your build, is a really big setback in terms of progression to getting to the end game, to these places and the kind of content that will actually allow you to farm good currency. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have for this video. Before I go, I want to say a huge thank you to my supporters. So Mario, Luro, Gaikona, Cluzy, Dino, Born Terrain, Scott, Kevin, Casticus, and Axel, as well as, of course, anybody else who wishes to remain anonymous, and anybody else who has supported me in the past. Huge thanks to you guys. Remember to drop by the stream. We're doing a ton of practice for the league start, trying to figure out what build I want to league start with, and of course drop by whenever the league actually starts, as I'm going to be streaming the game an absolute crazy amount, as I always do on my league starts. So hopefully you guys enjoy, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace out.